Every culture has its monsters. Bigfoot, the Wendigo, Mothman, Baba Yaga. Stories that took generations, sometimes centuries, to become folklore. But today, legends don't need centuries any longer. Because in 2018, a single image quietly uploaded to the internet would become one of the most recognizable monsters in the modern era. Before we dive into the creature, we must first understand its creator. Trevor Henderson is a Canadian illustrator, concept designer, and writer best known for creating unsettling images that blur the line between photography and fiction. Unlike traditional monster artists, Henderson rarely presents the creature as simple illustrations. Instead, he places it within realistic environments. Quiet forests, empty roads, forgotten buildings, scenes that feel completely ordinary, until you notice something shouldn't be there. Long before Siren Head, Trevor had already built a reputation online for these unsettling images. His work wasn't frightening because it was graphic, it was frightening because it looked possible. Each image felt less like a concept art and more like photography documenting something that had been accidentally discovered. With such an impressive catalog of material, it was only a matter of time before the mainstream would get involved. For creatures like Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster, it's almost impossible to pinpoint where the legend truly began. Their stories evolved over decades, passed from one generation to the next, and changed with every retelling. Siren Head is different. We know exactly where the story begins. The photo depicts a tall figure just beyond the tree line. Its body is impossibly thin, and its skin resembles dried wood or decaying flesh. And where his head should be, two weathered air raid sirens reside. There's no explanation, no backstory, no description telling us what we're looking at. Just an image. And that's what makes it so fascinating. Trevor doesn't ask us to imagine the creature, he presents it as though it's already been discovered. Almost like someone simply happened to photograph something they were never meant to see. And because the image never explains itself, it leaves us with more questions than answers. What is it? How tall is it? Why is it there? And perhaps most importantly, is this the only photograph? Unlike traditional folklore, Siren Head wasn't born through storytelling. It was born through ambiguity. Trevor Henderson provided us almost nothing beyond the image itself. Just enough information for our own imaginations to begin filling in the blanks. And that's exactly what the internet did. And before we can understand how millions of people helped build the legend, we first need to understand why the design worked so well. Because Siren Head isn't frightening by accident. Every part of its appearance serves a purpose. If Siren Head had remained just another interesting illustration, its story probably would have ended there. But it didn't. Instead, it became one of the most recognizable monsters of the internet age. The question is, why? Because on paper, its design almost sounds ridiculous. A giant creature with sirens for a head. That shouldn't be frightening. And yet, it is. The reason isn't any one feature, it's how every part of the design works together. The first thing you notice is its size. Siren Head towers over the trees, not just taller than a person, but taller than the very landscape itself. Humans instinctively judge danger by scale. The larger something appears, the more powerless we feel. But Trevor Henderson doesn't show us the creature standing beside people. He places it far away, barely visible, almost blending in with the horizon, which means our own imagination fills in the rest. Then there's the sirens. Not horns, not speakers, but emergency sirens. Objects we've already been taught to associate with danger long before Siren Head had existed.
Suddenly, their daily routine is rudely shattered by the screaming wail of air raid sirens, warning them of a possible enemy onslaught. This first demonstration of an all-out civil defense drill by America's #1 metropolis is a model of preparedness and training. Schools have been alerted, and pupils briefed on methods of protection from atomic blasts. With the simulated enemy bombing in progress, the mighty town's heart almost ceases to beat.
Those sounds already meant something. Tornadoes, air raids, civil emergencies. The design doesn't invent fear, it borrows it. Perhaps the most unsettling part is that Siren Head isn't doing anything. It's standing, watching, almost motionless. Most horror creatures attack immediately. Siren Head doesn't need to, because anticipation is often more frightening than the action. Trevor's settings were also clever. He rarely placed Siren Head inside cities. Instead, it would appear in forests, along abandoned roads, at the edge of empty fields, places where people already expect to feel isolated. The environment becomes part of the monster. A dense forest doesn't simply hide Siren Head. It makes you wonder, what else might be hidden there? But perhaps the most important decision Trevor ever made wasn't the creature itself. It was the way he presented it. These weren't illustrations in the traditional sense. They looked like photographs, ordinary landscapes captured with an ordinary camera. The impossible wasn't front and center, it was hidden. Sometimes you didn't even notice it at first. That tiny moment of realization when your eyes finally find the creature. That's what makes the image unforgettable. It's easy to think Siren Head became famous because it was the original, but originality alone isn't enough. The internet is filled with incredible monster designs that never become legends. Siren Head succeeded because its design invites participation. Every viewer notices something different. Some may focus on its height, while others, its silence. Or maybe the unsettling feeling that if this photograph existed, there might be another, and another. Trevor Henderson didn't simply design a monster. He designed a question that millions of people wanted to answer. As Siren Head spread, something interesting began to happen. People weren't just sharing the creature anymore. They were beginning to decide what Siren Head actually was. Unlike traditional movie monsters, Siren Head was never introduced with a rulebook. There wasn't a novel explaining its abilities, or an official guide detailing its behavior. Instead, its mythology emerged gradually, piece by piece, and image by image. One of the earliest ideas was that Siren Head could imitate sound. Not just emergency sirens, but voices, radio broadcasts, fragments of conversations, even cries for help.
Hi, Big Brother. Are you still working? We miss you lots and lots. Mommy and I send you big kisses.
I have the certainty now. It stands nearly 40 feet tall, a monolith of rusted flesh and bone. It manifests in the dead zones, in the silence of places like this.
It wasn't simply making noise, it was using familiarity as bait. Another reoccurring detail was patience. Rather than charging its victims, Siren Head often stood perfectly still, watching from a distance, allowing people to notice it, before deciding what happened next. That restraint became just as frightening as the creature itself. Its habitat became equally consistent. Dense forests, abandoned roads, remote locations, places where escape felt difficult, and witnesses were few. Over time, these ideas stopped feeling like an individual's interpretation. They became the expectation. But here's what's fascinating. Many of these rules weren't introduced all at once. They evolved naturally. One artist imagined how Siren Head hunted, another would explore what sounds it could produce. A filmmaker added something new, and a game borrowed those ideas, and expanded them further. Little by little, the mythology became richer, not because one person was writing it, but because thousands were, together. Which raises an interesting question. If no single person defined the legend, who actually wrote it? And the answer might be all of us. For centuries, folklore spread slowly. One story told around a campfire, then retold by travelers, passed from parents to children, each generation adding something new, changing small details, until eventually no one remembered where the story began. The internet works differently. Stories no longer travel by word of mouth, they travel by shares, posts, videos, and algorithms. And Siren Head had arrived exactly at the right moment. Trevor Henderson continued posting new images, each one revealing just a little more. Never enough to explain everything, only enough to invite another question. Fans immediately began filling in the blanks, and soon, artists began creating their own encounters. Each new interpretation introduced another piece of lore. Not because Trevor had written it, but because thousands of people collectively decided this is how Siren Head behaves. Then something unusual started to happen. People who had never seen Trevor Henderson's original work still knew Siren Head. Some assumed it was part of an old horror film, and others believed it was an SCP. Some even thought it was based on real folklore. It wasn't. It was only a few years old. But it already felt ancient. That's one of the strangest things about the internet. Once enough people repeat the same story, our memories begin to treat it as something that has always existed. As Siren Head spread, it slowly became larger than the artwork that had created it. Millions of people encountered the creature, without ever learning Trevor Henderson's name. For many, Siren Head wasn't an illustration. It was simply part of internet culture. That's something very few fictional characters can achieve. The creator remained the same, but ownership slowly began to shift. This was no longer simply fan art or fan fiction. It was folklore taking shape. One person tells a story, another changes it. Someone else remembers it differently. The next generation adds something new. The key difference is speed. What once took centuries now happens in months, or even weeks. Siren Head wasn't evolving because one person is writing its history. It was evolving because thousands of people were together. But if the internet helped create a legend, one question still remains. Trevor has designed dozens of unforgettable creatures. So why did this one become a phenomenon, while so many others remained niche? To answer that question, we must look beyond the monster itself. By this point, Siren Head had become impossible to ignore. Games, animations, found footage, millions of views across countless platforms. Entire wiki pages. What made this special? Because Trevor Henderson didn't create just one monster. Over the years, he's introduced dozens of unsettling creations. Cartoon Cat, Longhorse, Bridgeworm, the Country Road Creature, each one imaginative, each one terrifying in its own way. Yet somehow, Siren Head became something different. Not just another horror character, a cultural phenomenon. So, what made it special? The answer begins with simplicity. You can describe Siren Head in a single sentence. A giant creature with sirens for a head. That's all it takes. Good folklore rarely requires lengthy explanations. The images alone tell the story. Even if you've never seen Siren Head before, you immediately understand the idea. Then there's its silhouette. Think about the monsters that endure. Bigfoot, Shy Guy, Slenderman. These outlines are instantly recognizable. Siren Head is no different. You don't need to see every detail. Just two sirens towering above trees. Your brain fills in the rest. The most brilliant part of the design isn't that it's built from fantasy. Telephone poles exist, emergency sirens exist, forests exist, and lonely roads exist. Trevor Henderson combined familiar places into something impossible, which makes the impossible feel strangely believable. Timing also mattered. Siren Head didn't appear in the early days of the internet. It arrived in 2018, a moment when social media had become almost entirely visual. One striking image could reach millions overnight, and the internet had become the perfect environment for this kind of folklore. More importantly, Trevor Henderson never tried to explain anything. He didn't define every rule. He simply kept creating. Each new image answered one question, while raising two more. That restraint gave the audience permission to become storytellers themselves. It's tempting to believe Siren Head became famous because it was the best monster. I don't think that's true. Trevor Henderson didn't give the internet a finished legend. He gave it a beginning. For thousands of years, folklore followed a familiar path. A strange encounter, a whispered story. A warning passed down from one generation to the next. Over time, the details changed and some were forgotten. Others were invented, until eventually the legend became larger than the truth that inspired it. Not one person owned the story anymore. It belonged to everyone. At first glance, Siren Head doesn't seem to fit that pattern. We know who created it. We know when it first appeared. We even know the exact image that started it all. By every definition, it shouldn't be folklore. And yet, it feels like it is. Because people couldn't stop telling the story. Trevor Henderson created Siren Head, but millions of people expanded it. In many ways, that's exactly how folklore has always worked. A story no longer needs centuries to become familiar, only enough people willing to share it. And Siren Head isn't the only example. Slenderman, The Backrooms, even Candle Cove, each began differently, but all of them crossed the same invisible line. They stopped feeling like creations and started feeling like discoveries. Maybe that's the biggest change the internet has brought to storytelling. For most of history, legends belonged to places, a forest, a village. But today, they belong to communities, scattered across the world, connected by nothing more than a screen. Together, they create, refine, and preserve, and then pass those stories forward. just like our ancestors always did. Only now, it happens with a click of a button. When I first started this investigation, I thought I was researching a monster. Instead, I found myself watching something far more fascinating. Not the birth of Siren Head, but the birth of modern folklore. A reminder that despite all of our technology, our algorithms, and our social media, even artificial intelligence, human beings still do something we've always done. We tell stories. We shape them, until one day someone hears that story and can't remember of a time before it existed. Maybe that's why Siren Head has endured. Not because it was the tallest, or the loudest, or even the scariest, but because for a brief moment, millions of people unknowingly participated in the creation of modern folklore. And if Siren Head has taught us anything, it's that the next legend may be already out there. If you enjoyed today's investigation, consider subscribing. Every like, every comment, every shared theory helps preserve a piece of internet history. Before you go, I have one last question. What do you think will become the next piece of digital folklore? Will it be another monster, another image, or has it already appeared, waiting for the rest of us to notice? Oh, and one more thing before we wrap up. The archive has finally opened, and by that I mean we've officially launched a Discord server. If you'd like to hang out with me and your fellow cryptivist, we'd love to have you. We talk about upcoming investigations, vote on future cases, share theories, discuss strange discoveries from around the internet, and every now and again we'll even jump into a game or host a movie night. You'll find an invite waiting for you in the description. This was Mr. 404, and until our next broadcast, I wish you a good ending.